Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today's topic is SAP Persistence, Creating Source Code Automatically. My name is Erin Letts. I am the Operations Manager here at Blackvard Management Consulting, and I will be your host for today. Now, I do want to go ahead and introduce our special guest speaker, Lukas Dietzsch. Lukas is the CEO and Principal Consultant here at Blackvard. Lukas hails from Germany and is an experienced IT solution architect and project lead and has been working with SAP for well over 10 years now. Lukas is well versed in SAP from SRM, ERP, FSCM, SD, MM, and CRM, just to name a few. He is also fluent in the ABAP programming language and HANA. Lukas has helped implement software and management solutions around the world, working with powerhouse companies such as SAP, AG, and Ariba, and BMW. Now, before we do jump into today's webinar, I do want to mention that we have previously covered the basic overview of SAP Persistence Service in another webinar. In that previous webinar, I not only give a basic overview, but I also cover the key concepts used in persistence, transient and persistent data, data in object-oriented programming, as well as persistence classes and managed objects. That webinar can be viewed via the link displayed here on the screen through our website, www.blackvard.com. So if you do have any questions regarding the overview webinar, please feel free to ask. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn the reins on over to Lukas, and we'll get started. All right, should be all yours.
Thank you, Erin, for this introduction. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can.
All right, then let's go into this webinar. What will be covered first, the small introduction and the overview of the previous webinar is already explained by Erin. We will now directly jump into the development, and first we will have a look at the components. We will check, or we will create a persistence object or a persistence class using the framework. And then we have two use cases. We want to request data from a database table, in our case the flight table. We will request data, and the second use case is we want to add data using the persistence framework. All right, first let's talk about our architecture, or in this case our sample. You see on top all the interfaces that are automatically created by the framework. Down there you have this abstract set CB myFlight and the agent class set A myFlight. All these things are generated automatically. The only thing we will do is we will create a class for our flight, and that's the thing you see on the right. There is the class setCL myFlight, with a lot of attributes and a lot of methods, multiple methods for getting and setting data, but everything on this class is automatically generated. The only thing we will do is we will generate our class, and we will add a mapping. We will add a mapping to this flight table, and then the attributes and the methods are automatically generated, as well as the interfaces and the abstract and the agent class. So let's go into this step. Step one is we create our class. This can be done either in SE24 transaction or in the SE80. You create a new class, name it, you provide a description, and then you select persistent class. Save it locally in your temporary folder. In this case, we use the temp package because it will never be transported anywhere. It's just for test purposes. And the next thing on the right side, you see in your class library all the automatically created classes. So we create the setCL myFlight, setCB myFlight, and setCA myFlight will be automatically generated. All right, let's jump into the system and let's do this. So we are here in the system. You can now either create your class, as I told you here, in the SE80, or you go step by step. We use transaction SE24. We will create a new class in this case. Click on create, we provide a name, and here we say it's a demo class for persistence. As I explained, we select persistent class. We can use a public one, that's nothing special in this case. All right, then we click on save. Here we see we save it in our temporary package. And you saw all the attributes or all the generation objects here down here were automatically generated, and that's the result we get here. So first we see the properties. That's the same thing like a normal class. We have here automatically the forward declaration, the object types automatically added. We have an interface, IFO state. We have some friends, that's the base agent class, which was automatically generated as well. And currently our flight has no, or our new class CL flight has no attributes. But it inherited some methods from the interface, some events, no types, but some aliases as well. All right, so this is everything we have. Then we will have a look at the structure that you see, the class library. All these classes here you see were generated now. That means this one we created, and this one as well as this one were automatically generated. Okay, so now we have a class, but we do not want to add a lot of attributes, or we do not want to create all the methods by hand manually. So let's go into the mapping. We want to map the flight table to this class. It depends on your NetWeaver version. You can either use here a button. Sometimes there is here a button saying persistence, or we go and go to persistence represent, and that's the same thing. This is the same approach. Let's switch back to the presentation. You see the steps we did. The interface was automatically added to this class, as well as the friends. And now the next thing what we do is we do the mapping. Here on the right side, you see the persistence button, or you go onto the go to persistence representant. That's the thing that's depending on your version, but nevertheless, the result is the same. There is no difference between clicking on the button or using this one here. So we use the go to persistence representant, and that's the thing we now see here. Let's switch back to the presentation. Here we have this overview, and we will select our data dictionary object. In this case, you can use a table, a view, structure, whatever you need. It depends on your need. In our sample, we use the as flight and click on confirm. That's what we do here as well. It's as flight. Confirm it. And now you see all the attributes or all the columns from the table as flight. They appear down here. You have the carrier ID, which is a primary key field. You have the connection ID, a primary key as well. And the flight date is a primary key. All right. So the next thing we want to do, we want to add all these attributes to our class. This is easy in the case here. We double click on carrier ID. Then you see it appears here. Now we could provide another description, or we could change the visibility of this attribute, but we take it as it is and we add it to our class. So that's something we can do for all our attributes: connection, flight date, price, currency, plane type, whatever. We take all of them. Now all the attributes from AsFlight are added or the columns from AsFlight are added as attributes to our class, but they are not added yet because we did not save it and nothing is generated. Let's have a look at the generator settings first. Here we can decide what we want to use. You can say multiple implementation of database access layer, generate methods for multiple accesses, and so on. In our case, we keep it as it is, as a default. That's the common approach in this case, and we confirm. So let's repeat the steps we did. We selected the AsFlight mapping, and we selected all the single attributes of AsFlight and added them to the class. Here you see step by step. You double click on the name, then click on the black arrow and icon and add it to your new class. And in the end, it will look like this. And that's the same thing we see here. Our generator settings are made, we are fine, and the thing we do now is we save it. And then you see down here, a lot of generation is going on. The generator is working a lot. And now it is creating a lot of methods. You will see this, for example, if we go here into attribute, there you see all the attributes on the right side are now real attributes in our class. The same thing with the methods. There are a lot of methods automatically generated. Here you see getter methods to get data from a database, or to set methods to change values of the objects. All right, so now you see this class is currently not active. I will double click on the class and activate it. Yes, the actor should also be activated. All right, now everything is active. Let's have a look at the methods. If you go into, for example, a getter method, then you see the generated source code there. Here's a lot of description. There is a state ready access method. This will inform the system that you read this attribute and you get a result. In this case, it's the price. And all the other methods are similar. Let's have a look at the setter method, set price. Here you see this is informing the class agent that we want to write something. It checks if the price is a different one than the object, meaning if you provide another price and the price does not differ from the previous one, system will do nothing. Otherwise, it will change the price of the object, and it will inform the class agent that something was changed. That's important for the later persistence process, that the data will be written to the database. All right, let's switch back to the presentation. You see what we did. All the attributes appear and the methods were generated and are now listed in our class overview. You see all the get and setter methods. We clicked on the save button and activated it. Now let's do something with our newly generated class. We have a use case, or we have in this sample here, we have two use cases. The first one is we want to request data from a database table. In our case, we want to get some data from AsFlight table. And the second use case is we want to change data, existing data, or we want to add data in a database table. All right, let's start first with requesting data. Here you see this sample. That's a coding, or that's a small sample to get some data out of the database. We will walk through it step by step. It's a simple report, so we have report in the report description in line 1. Line 3 contains some data definitions. The important thing is we start in line 7, our try catch block. This is important for exception handling, because in the case you provide information for an object, or you want to get information from an object that does not exist in a database, the methods or the agent methods will throw an exception. In this case, the OS object not found exception. You see this in line 22. There you could do something with this issue. You can handle it, or you can go to the next object, whatever. It depends on your use case in this case. Let's go ahead. In line 9, we do something. We use our locally defined reference to the object, to the flight agent class. We add the agent to the local agent. That's important because in line 12, we have our local object LO flight, and that's something we want to fill with persistent data we want to select from the database. And that is the get persistent method from the LO agent, LO flight agent. We have to provide a lot of, or not a lot of, in this case, we have to provide the key fields, the primary key fields of the database table. As you remember, the primary key was carrier ID, connection ID, and flight date. In the sample, we have a carrier ID, it's LH for Lufthansa in this case. We have the connection ID, it's 401, and the flight date is the 4th of April 2014. After this is successfully processed, we have LO flight, which contains all the attributes and all the data from this entry from the database table for exactly this primary key. And we could touch, or we could get all the information from the object by our getter and setter methods. In this case, we want just to show something. We want to get the price. That's the thing you see in line 17. We have a local variable LV price, and we will add to this local variable the price from our flight object. This can be done by LO flight, and we use the get price method in this case. Line 20 contains a small statement that we see everything was right, or that we have a printout, just a small text, the price for this entire flight is, and then the attribute, if this was successfully loaded from the database, LV price would contain some values. Let's go. Yeah, that's the same thing as I explained. The agent will provide some methods we can use. For example, get persistent, just the key value. We will read it into our local object, and our local object will move, or will provide the information, for example, via the method get price, into our local variable, which we can use. That's the thing that was explained here. And here you see the printout. And the printout works, is not required, of course, but is here to show that we have some values in this entry. So that's a very effective and reusable approach, because you can switch these things, or you can use these getter methods without using select statements. So that's a great approach in this case. Our second use case is adding new data, completely new data, to the database table. We create a flight object, the same like in the previous use case. We have to reference the agent class. That is be done in line 8 in the sample. Here we reference, or we add the agent class to our local reference agent, and then we do the same thing like in the get persistent. We create a persistent entry, and this can be done by the method create persistent. We create a new persistent object. We provide the key. In this case, we have to provide the complete key, or the complete primary key: carrier ID, connection ID, and flight date. We use the connection ID 999 that we can that we will find our new entry later easy in the database. And we have our local object flight, which contains now a new persistent object, and we can set some attributes, or we can set the values for these object. And we do this in line 16. We set a flight price. It's a very expensive flight. In this case, just for example, we set the price 999,999 cents. So, and then the important thing here is you have to commit your changes. If you do not commit, or if the system will not commit automatically at the end of your logical unit of work, then your changes will never reach the database. So this is important, that either you care about the commit, or the LUW has at the end a commit statement. Otherwise, your data will not appear in a database. And let's have a look at our changes we made. Our newly created entry appears in the database table as flight. You can use this by check this by using SE18, SE16N, or SE11, and go to the as flight table. And here you see the entry LH999 and the flight date. And the only attribute we changed is the price, in this case the airfare. The currency, plane type, capacity, and so on, all the additional attributes are not touched. So we can change them or we can leave them. The important thing to provide a new entry is a complete primary key. This must be provided, otherwise the system will throw an issue or will throw an exception. That's all. So how simple is that? We can create a new entry. We can select data from database table by avoiding select statements, just using the persistence framework. So if you have additional questions, then feel free to ask. Erin, do we have questions in the pipeline there?
Yeah, we actually do. We have a few questions. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. James says, I created a new class and now I want to add a new column to the flight table. How do I do this? Or is it automatically created as an attribute?
That's an important question. Let's go to the system. We will go to our class. We will check the mapping. And for example, if the table was changed meanwhile, then a new column we do not have a mapping already. The new column would appear here, and you have the option to edit. So for example, we can use this column and say we delete it. And if I delete it up here, it will appear down here again, and we could use it. So if a new column was added, it will look like this. So you got an overview of your flight table, the new column, and you can now say, I want to double click on it. I want to add this new column, and this new column will be listed here. Then you have to save it again, and the whole class will be regenerated, because each change on this model, on this mapping model, will lead to a complete new makes it necessary to generate the complete class again. And you have to activate this new class as well. So it is easy to add or to remove some columns, but you have to think about your process. If you, for example, set all the attributes manually, so if you set them, manually in your coding, then you have to use, or you have to add the method for the setter method or getter method for this newly added attribute as well in your process there. So answer is, yeah, it's quite easy to edit, and you saw how to do this. Are there additional questions?
James, does that answer your question? Okay, he says yes. All right, second, you talked about two object statuses. One is persistent and the other transient. Is it possible to use a transient object? Can you clarify?
Yes, you can use transient objects. For example, if you want to, wait a second, where are the methods? There is it. You can create a persistent object if you're going to save it or to store it later in the database. Or if you want to use a temporary object, then you can create a transient object. The principle of the creation is similar, so you need a complete key to use it, and it's like a temporary object that will not be stored in the database. So at the end of the LOW, your transient objects will be cleaned up by the garbage collector. They will not reach a database. So sometimes it's possible to have transient objects to manipulate or to copy whatever, some data to another object. And therefore this option of transient objects or transient objects is provided. Does it answer the question?
Yes, yeah. She says she's good. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. One last one, it looks like. Can I define a dedicated time when the data is stored, or does this happen automatically?
You can ensure that your data will be saved immediately by using the commit statement. Let's switch back to the presentation. We have this commit work statement here in the source code in line 21. So only by using this commit work, you can ensure that your data is stored automatically or is persisted immediately. If you have to rely on your LUW, for example, you're in a booking process, whatever, and the commit work is at the end, then all your changes will reach the database, of course, but not before the commit statement was sent. So you cannot say, I want to define a timestamp or something like this. You have two options. Either you care about the commit work on your own, or you rely on your LUW and it will automatically commit the work at the end of the LUW. Does it answer the question?
Yes, Kevin says yes. All right, so that's the last question that we currently have. If anybody else has any additional questions, please feel free to go ahead and post those now. Let's just see if anybody has anything. All right, it's not looking like it, so let me go ahead and just take control again. Unless, Lucas, you have anything else you want to add?
Not for now. I'm done with this. Thank you.
All right. All right, so as usual, if you guys do have any additional questions, please do feel free to go ahead and send us an email over to info@blackvard.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Lucas, for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
And we will catch you guys back here later. Have a good afternoon, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.